So happy to see you today. I'm glad we got to do this. We got so much great feedback after the last session. So I'm super happy to host you on the channel again, and I'm loving all the activity on your channel as well. I'm really loving all of your shorts. Those have been a lot of fun, and they're short, they're informative. I love the scenery and all the different places, and you look adorable, like all bundled up. I'm like, oh, I want to be there. So I'm so happy for me, it looks like you're just living your best life.
Thank you. Yeah, we're trying, and it's been fun. My husband is my camera person, and there's a new series of shorts coming where he's on camera too. So
Nice.
it's both of us. Yeah. We have a live coming up on April 13th where we're comparing soulful astrology versus practical astrology. So like
Awesome.
healing versus helpful. And it's sort of an artificial distinction. Obviously, all astrology is healing and practical and helpful, but it's been really interesting talking about the difference between how astrology is used. And so we've had a great time. We've been all over Yorkshire. We recorded in Durham. We recorded at the Durham Cathedral, which is like 900 years old. On the medieval walls in York. Yeah, so we're like puttering all around the north of England recording these little videos. So it has been super fun.
I love it. Maybe we'll see some at some local pubs, huh?
Yeah. The trick is to find a place where there's not too much background noise. So maybe I need a little microphone, but pubs
I was gonna say,
there's tons of them here.
you would that would really help, especially with some of the shorts, because it'll help to block out like the sound of the wind in certain
I think it's a
places.
good
So
idea.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm super happy to be here today. We have some friends in the chat. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And thank you for being here today. She's looking forward to the live stream. I know, me too. And Desiree, my dear sweet Desi, so happy that you're here. She saw the notification, so she decided to join in. She's got her tea brewing and she is ready to go. And then Ravneet, that's Winds of Reflection. So happy to see you here today, my friend.
Wow.
Escaping me at this moment. I am very, but State of Grace is with us today as well. So yeah. Where should we begin, Miss Robin?
Oh, okay. So yeah, it's wonderful to see you all. And I've gotten to know some of you since the last live. So thank you everybody for coming. And so Elizabeth and I are, I'm more of an astrologer, although I do have some experience with tarot. And Elizabeth obviously has this amazing tarot channel. And so the two of us cooked up this idea of like astrology versus tarot, which one is good for one, which one is good for something else, sort of to combine our two areas of expertise. But I just want to note that, so I came up with a whole list, which I emailed to Elizabeth. You can't really see it here, but it's quite long. I have this thing where like, I'm able to generate 15 ideas on any topic. It was a list. But some of these things I wasn't able to, I felt like I didn't have the expertise to really, it was an idea, but I don't really know enough about it. And then I know Elizabeth will know, but I have a hunch that we also might have some people in the audience here who are joining us who have some expertise in some of these areas. So I just want to encourage you guys to chime in with your opinion on what we say about tarot and astrology if you have expertise that we don't have. And also just to say that the point is to have a lively, fun discussion. It's not really to say that tarot is better for this or astrology.
It's not a face-off.
Yeah, that's right. We're getting our dukes out, right?
Put your dukes up.
There's definitely a YMVV, right? Your mileage may vary, right? You may find a genius at this thing that I'm like, I don't think tarot is good for this. But we're just trying to have a good time and see what people think, and definitely chime in with your experience. If you have experience using tarot or astrology for these things, we'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, it's fascinating too, because I think maybe a week or so ago, I can't remember where, I was in a live or I was having a conversation or something, but they were like, oh, that's probably a better question for the Lenormand. And I was like, yeah, I guess, I never really thought about it. I just kind of go to the tarot for almost anything, just to kind of check in with my intuition. But it's true, there are different tools And it's a good idea, to know which one to tap into or lean into when you need it. And I just want to quickly say hello. Heather is joining us in the chat. That's Indigo Jaguar.
Oh,
Uh,
cool. I love that
so
name. That's
thank
a great name.
you. Yeah, she has a cool cool channel name. Thank you so much for being here today. And I think, oh, and Rain, Spiritual Rain, is joining us. So she's here today. Tropical Empress. Good morning, and thank you for being here. So yeah, let's jump in.
Okay, perfect. So I basically came up with the idea that astrology, I think, is better at some aspects of divination and client work. Tarot is better at some aspects, just my opinion, right? And then there's a few like things where I wasn't really sure about that. So I thought maybe we should, go back and forth. And then of course I want to hear what you think about whether tarot is good for, right? So I thought maybe we'd start with one that I wasn't sure about, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
And that is the ability to predict the future.
Ooh.
Right. So I said the last time I was on this channel that I automatically reject every good idea, which I later come back to. And at the beginning, I was like, no, I'm not doing any predictive work. That's not for me. And then it became a huge part of my practice because learning to predict the ups and downs of my energetic and mental health cycles became, huge. And then I wanted to convince my parents it was real and they're scientists. So I knew that I had to make some like concrete predictions that would come true to really get their attention. So yeah, so astrology is great for predicting the future if you use it for that and you have a gift for that. What is tarot like for predicting the future? Have you tried that? Has anybody in our audience here tried predicting the future with tarot, and how did that go?
I think it's a mixed bag, right?
Yeah.
Because and actually a few months ago I was a part of a tarot ethics discussion on Roots and Waves channel, and this subject came up because there are a lot of people that use it for prediction, but then there are a lot of readers that don't really use it for predictive purposes. They use it more for self-reflection. Now, I would not be honest if I didn't say that there are times that things come through to me through the cards that I'm like, okay, okay, this is something bigger than what I think it is, right? So I do feel like there are times when messages come through that are leaning towards the predictive. When I grab the cards, that's not really what I'm, going for. But if it shows up, I honor it.
Yeah. Well, I know that I mean, the hardest questions for me from a predictive standpoint are the when will this happen questions. Like, when will I get a job, right? Or when can I get pregnant? Or when will I find my life partner or something like that? When will I get a promotion? Or somebody recently asked me, when should I apply for a new job? Like, when are the energies going to be good? That's a little bit easier. But so I know that there are some things in tarot where it's like, what is it like? Swords are things happening right away. And then like swords are hours and wands are days. And then cups are weeks and pentacles are months.
Are like the slow.
I know,
Yes,
right?
a
Just the
lot of
earth
people
sign. Yeah.
assign like different associations to timing with tarot. And it's funny because I did the Tarot Foundations class that Sadhana hosted, Integrative Healing with Sadhana. And we did touch on timing during the 16 weeks that we were together. But I didn't really pull that into my practice. I just, I don't know. Maybe sometime down the road, but at this point, like, yeah, I don't use it for that. It's interesting, right? It's curious.
Yeah. Well, I see Desiree in the chat says, I find that tarot is hard to answer the when. Yeah. So I found that too when I was doing tarot, that the when questions were not as easy for me in a lot of ways. So I'll just share, if you're intrigued by that and you want to work on that, the thing that helped me was to start practicing in very low stakes situations. So don't practice when can I get a job, or when will I get pregnant. Practice with like, when am I going to have an amazing conversation with a stranger?
Ooh.
Or when am I going to
Mm-hmm.
or there's a playing card system that helps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what really helped me, was to start predicting low stakes situations. And like, we would go to the market in England, this was a couple of years ago, and I would be like, what will the person look like who Steve buys his lunch from? Right? Steve's going to buy his lunch from somebody. Is this person going to be a man or a woman? Are they going to be tall or dark haired or light haired? Are they going to be, a British person or a non-native English speaker? And that really helped me a lot. So it's like, and then I think not everybody maybe has a gift for predictive timing as well. But I feel like, some people, that's like normal gifts, right? Some people have amazing gifts for relationship readings, and other people are like more about money.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so what is that? Sorry, Winds of Reflection says, I found that too, even if you ask, it only gives a possibility of what's in the present timeline, right? That's an interesting question. Like, can you predict, or is it like, well, this might happen, and then if you take some action. So yes. I'll just say that I've found that astrology can predict what actually does happen with startling accuracy. I was stunned. So at one point, one of the questions I asked was, when will I find the vintage sweater I'm looking for? Another low stakes situation. Mm-hmm. And I did a whole reading on it. I used Horary astrology, and it showed like the style of the sweater and where it would be found and what my condition would be when I found it, a whole bunch of things. And then for timing, I came up with the number 22. And I wanted that to be 22 days because it was the spring and I wanted a spring sweater. So I was like, okay, well, in the next 3 weeks, I'll get this. I looked everywhere. I didn't find any sweaters. I figured I'd probably just messed it up. And then we moved to Paris, and I'd completely forgotten about it. And I was like taking a walk in this horrible funk, and I heard a voice in my head that said, turn right here. So I turned right. I walked down the street, and I saw a dark pile at the base of a dumpster. Mm-hmm. And I looked at it, and it was the most gorgeous and incredible vintage sweater. Oh. And it was the vintage sweater that had been predicted, like wasp waist, cabled, blousey sleeves. Everything was right. Like, I was in terrible condition because I was grumpy. It was down low in the ground, which had been predicted. And I was like, what about the timing? And I went back to my apartment and I looked up the reading because I'd written it down. Mm-hmm. And it was 22 weeks and 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Wow.
Totally crazy. Yeah.
That's awesome. But yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, because if you start low, then,
yeah, you're not going to get it
like, no love lost, right? If right. Until you kind of figure it out.
All right. How about tarot versus astrology on uncovering hidden motives?
Hidden motives. Yes.
You didn't realize you were like this. You didn't realize somebody else was angry about something. You're like, why is my boss ignoring me? I don't really get it. You can see I gravitate towards these like very practical questions. But yeah, what do we think? Which is better, tarot or astrology for uncovering hidden motives? Maybe your own hidden motives. Like, I don't know why I keep being attracted to these men who are not nice to me, or these women who are not nice to me. Yeah.
Yes. So that's a good point, because again, like, I don't tend to read on other people's energy, right? I tend to read on my own. So I would use it to dive deeper into something that I'm like feeling or experiencing. But again, I feel like it's a connection to your intuition. And depending on how often you use your intuition, I feel is how strong of an answer you're going to get from those questions. What would you say in terms of astrology?
Well, we have someone in the chat that says, and I didn't see who it was, but it says, I don't tend to find those types of answers when I type into my intuition. Like, that's a good question. Is if you're reading intuitively, maybe you're not predicting when you're going to find a sweater, right? Is that something that your intuition can predict? Whereas your intuition can definitely be like, actually, I'm attracted to these unhealthy partners because I'm repeating past patterns, or I feel like I don't deserve love, or I feel like it's my job to save somebody, So I think that's really true, that where the source of wisdom comes from has a big impact on what types of information you can pull from any sort of divination, practice. And part of the reason I was trying things like, when am I going to find my sweater, is I was specifically trying to do readings that I didn't think my own intuition could supply the information. I'm like, I was pushing the envelope. Can I connect with some wisdom that isn't just like, if I thought about it hard, I could probably figure this out for myself. So yeah. I find that horary astrology is amazing for pulling out hidden motives. And I don't know if I know here what horary astrology is. It's kind of a weird
please
word.
Share. Yeah.
Horary, right. So chart. So like there's a birth chart, the United States chart. But there's another way using it more in a sort of divinatory capacity where you pull up the chart for the moment the question is asked. So yeah, the moment the question is asked it's like the question has its own birth chart in that moment.
Wow.
And then there's a way of reading. Yeah. And the first astrology book written in English was written by a guy named William Lilly in London in like 1647. And when we moved to London, I decided I would read it because I was in London and that's where he was. And I would be like, this out. And I just decided I would practice it and give it a try. Are you interested in the history of this? Should I share like a tiny bit about the history of horary? It's kind of interesting. I don't know if I should dive into it.
Why not? Yes. Let me say hello because we have a few friends in the chat. So Lexi is joining us. Thank you for being here today. Good morning. Rain's getting her carrot juice all over her keyboard. All right. And sorry, the chat is moving pretty quickly. So sorry if I missed someone. But yeah, feel free to drop any questions into the chat if you have any questions. So Mariam, hello and welcome. And she says, yes, please. This is so interesting.
Oh, thank you. And I will say that we have a couple of members on my Patreon who are here today as well. And I really appreciate it. Thank you for supporting us. We're going to be doing even more like healing articles on the Patreon and talking about personal stories and how to use astrology for healing. But I'm so grateful for everybody who's supported me on the Patreon. It makes a huge difference. Okay, so the interesting thing about horary astrology is that back in the day, this is how this idea developed, that you could actually just pull the chart for the moment the question is asked, because it's not intuitive. Like it's more intuitive to say, oh, the baby's born. That's a huge moment. And then that affects, their astrology chart. So they were, and I apologize if there's a little bit of a trigger warning. This is one of these things where we have to look at past societies and understand that they were doing things that we don't approve of anymore.
Right.
But basically what happened was that the question was asked by wealthy, mostly people who were getting readings back. Sorry, when I say this is like the Hellenistic era. So this is 2000 years ago, the late antiquity, Greece and Rome, like those sorts of places. They were wealthy people. And so they asked a lot of questions about personal property. And one of the most common questions they asked is, where has my runaway slave gone? Or I woke up and my cattle have disappeared. Where have they gone? When am I going to get them back? And what the astrologer, of course, asks is, well, when did the cattle disappear? But people were having a problem where they would wake up in the morning and the cattle would be gone or their slave would be missing, and they had no idea when the slave has left. And so people started asking the question for the moment the question was asked. Sorry, pulling a chart for the moment the question was asked, because they didn't have an actual moment. So horary astrology is great for things that don't have a birth chart. So if you're asking about somebody's marriage, you can always pull the chart for the day they got married. But if you're asking for a thing like, well, what about when I got sick? Well, people don't always know when they first get sick, right? You might be kind of feeling run down and you think you're just tired. And then a week later, you're like, oh my gosh, I feel really horrible. So horary pulls the chart for the moment. And then you read that chart as an answer to the question. And it's sort of mind bending. Like the first one I did, I was missing something. And I was like, I think my thimble was missing. No, a spool of thread. And it predicted exactly where the spool of thread was.
Really?
How does it happen? Right. Yeah. So it's really, really good for predicting that sort of thing. And it's great for uncovering hidden motives. So it was used back in the day for a lot of questions. This was what was interesting about learning this from a book written in 1643. You could see how different society was. So a lot of the questions that were answered were things like, My brother's ship is overdue. Is he still alive, or was there a shipwreck and he's not alive anymore?
Oh, wow.
I know,
Yeah.
right? It's just the kind of stuff that we don't really worry about. Or my son is betrothed to this woman. Is she a virgin as promised?
Mm-hmm.
Or even there was one that was like, there's a rumor that reached the capital that the Duke of Northumberland was defeated in the north. Is that true, or is it just a rumor? Because their communication wasn't the communication we have. And so it could take weeks for actually anybody from the battle to arrive
The
in London.
messages, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that they had is things like, why does my mother-in-law hate me? Or if I marry this man, is he going to inherit his father's wealth the way he says he will? And it is great for uncovering hidden motives. It's so good for like getting to the heart of the matter, in part because those were things people really needed back in the day, which I think we sort of need now, but in a slightly different kind of way. So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. That because, without communication, like people had more questions. It's not like
yeah.
today that you go to your phone and let me Google or Siri
Yeah.
and
Yeah. No,
ask.
it's totally true. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So I think, thank you. I see Winds of Reflection that you subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I've got plans actually. We're doing a lecture on how Schumann resonances can help you identify which planets can heal your communication. And that, yeah. So if you subscribe to my email list, by the way, on my website, spiritsaid.com, you'll get an invitation to that, the next lecture. But my spirit guides persuaded me to put this lecture up on YouTube. So it is going to be available for my YouTube subscribers.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you to the spirit guides for telling me this is good information. Okay. So here's some things I thought that tarot was better at than astrology.
Okay.
I think tarot has a lower barrier to entry. Like if you just want to pick up some tarot cards, like anybody could look at the 10 of Swords and be like, that doesn't look good. Right? Or like the 3 of Cups, it'd be like, oh, beautiful people are dancing together and having fun.
Yes.
I think, and I got into tarot before I got into astrology. And the first card I ever pulled for myself on some online thing was the Death card. And I was just like instantly sucked in. It was a horse and a skeleton with armor, and I love Halloween. And I'm like, this is cool. I was like, love at first sight. Ooh, Winds of Reflection says that they got the 10 of Swords yesterday.
Got the 10 of Swords yesterday.
Swords.
Hey, Maria, thank you for being here today. And Selena, that's Essence of the Moon. Thank you for being here. Good morning.
Yeah. And I'll say that I think this is important in part because, of course, it's sort of like the gateway divination, to a lot of other things you could do. But I also have found that I have had way more success drawing in strangers with tarot readings than I ever have with astrology.
Ooh, why is that?
Let's tell you a story, right? So Steve and I have this little mini tarot deck. It's a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, but it's this big. And I carry it around in my purse, and we play cards with it sometimes if we're like at a restaurant and we're just like waiting for food or whatever. And sometimes we do like a little reading before we play cards if we have some question on our nomadic journey. So we were in Moab, Utah, and we had dinner, and my inner voice was like, you need ice cream. And I was like, what? Like, I don't normally have dessert after every meal, but they were like, you need ice cream. And they said, and you need to get ice cream at the old bicycle shop that was turned into a bar that's across the street from your hotel.
That's specific.
And I was like, yes, right. And right now, right now. I'm like, can we go for a walk? And they were like, no, you need to go right now. And I'm like, oh. So part of what I love about the nomadic journey is that you can follow your intuition and you have no idea where you are or what's going to happen. It's really cool. So we go there, we order ice cream, and we are doing a little mini reading, and the barista comes up to us and she says, is that a tarot deck? And I was like, why, yes, actually, we're just doing a little reading. And she had this big, her eyes were very wide. And I looked at her and I was like, would you like me to do a reading for you right now? And she was like, uh-huh. Yeah, that would be great. Could you do a reading for me right now? So I shuffled the cards and I just pulled a single card, and it was the Lovers reversed.
Oh.
And she looked at it and she was like, what does that mean? And I'm like, this is what I like. I love the challenge, right? I have no idea who this person is. I've never met her. I know nothing about her life, but you just dive in and see what's going to happen. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, well, in general, this means that there's some connection or relationship that is ending for you. So maybe you were tied with somebody, you were connected, but now it's reversed. So it's time for you to stop thinking about that person and go off on your own path and do your own thing. Right. And then you're like, what's going to happen next? And she looked at me and she's like, I just broke up with my boyfriend 2 days ago and I can't stop thinking about him, but I know I need to let go. That's exactly what I need. And I'm, tarot, so
Yes.
cool. Right. So we have this whole conversation about the boyfriend, and I think I pulled a couple clarifying cards, and she ends up paying for our ice cream, which was lovely. And then
Oh.
about 10 minutes later, another lady comes up and she looks at us and she's like, is that a tarot deck? I was like, yes. And then she's like, I'm friends with the bartender and she told me you pulled a card for her. Could you pull a card for me too? I've never had that happen doing an astrology reading at a restaurant. I mean, Steve and I have pulled out astrology charts and we've looked at our phones, and this happened to me all over the world, that people come up and they're like, what is that? What are you doing? What's going on? We did a whole reading for a guy on his business in a pub in York, like a few months ago. And I just think that's great, right? The ability to pull people in and show them what divination can do and
Mm-hmm.
give out beautiful messages. And you don't need a phone, you don't need an internet connection, you don't need a giant book. It doesn't take very long. All you need is this magical little deck of cards. Yeah.
Yes, it's
Oh,
like an
and says,
instant connection with
yeah,
people. And
yeah.
Ange says this all the time, like uh the conversations like this, it's an art. And
Mm,
it seems that people today have a difficult time just
mm,
having
yeah,
conversations because we do everything behind the guise of a phone. And
yeah,
somehow we feel very brave saying all kinds of things that in real life I don't think we would say.
right.
you know so yes, I love I love that people, and it speaks to you as well, right? Because you must have been warm, welcoming, inviting for them to feel like, oh, I'm just gonna ask. I'm
Yeah,
just gonna ask.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I grew up in a family where I sort of got criticized for being too friendly. It was
Mm.
one of these. Some Holocaust trauma in our background, and there was like stranger danger. And I'm like very, very friendly. And an interesting thing about astrology, you might not know about this, but your natal astrology chart can actually tell you where you face danger in your life. Like,
Mm.
where is it? If you're going to have an accident, if you're going to have an incident with a person, is it going to be in your home? Is it going to be at work? Is it going to be out in public? And the interesting thing is that my chart, the safest part of my chart is talking to strangers in public. I've literally
Really?
never had a bad interaction in 50 years of talking to strangers in public. And all of the danger in my chart comes from my relationships and my family.
Wow.
Ironically, my family was the ones warning me about being overly friendly with strangers. But in fact, it was those warnings that posed the biggest danger because they made me feel like my natural energies were unsafe or unhealthy somehow. And it's the strangers that I always have the best interaction with. So I think maybe that's why I do these readings for
Mm.
strangers pretty regularly.
Desiree says talking about feelings is lost as
Yeah,
well. And that's so, so true. Because our
yeah,
feelings influence so much of what we do and how we
hmm,
behave
yeah,
and interact with others. So, yeah, wow,
yeah. Very
this
cool.
is awesome. It's awesome
Good.
too because, as a tarot reader, sometimes I have to admit that there are times where I fear pulling out a deck in public.
Yeah.
That I fear someone saying, like, is that a pack of cards? No, you're not allowed to be. Like, what are the odds
Yeah.
of that, right? I pulled a deck out in public once. I was on a trip in Arizona, uh, and there was a couple that was on the same tour that I was on, and they were fascinated, and they did the same,
Oh,
like, oh, can you pull? And then I pulled a couple of cards, and they were like, oh my God, that's
that's so
exactly
cool.
right. That's exactly how and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, and that gave me a lot of confidence to be able to, you know, to do that and to feel more
Mhm.
comfortable. And so now I carry a little mini deck in my purse at all times,
Yeah.
just in case, because you never know.
Mhm. Yeah. 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 Well, I think part of why it's helpful to have that astrology reading where you can know where danger is coming from, right? Like I was just reading for a mother, and her daughter has Mars in the 10th house. So that's a classic example of somebody who will face danger out in public situations. And maybe
Mm,
that's the person who doesn't want to carry a tarot deck, especially if they're in a conservative environment, right? Or they're someplace where maybe alternate spirituality is not so supported, right? So
mhm.
knowing like where is it safe for you to show your art and talk to people, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love this.
Cool.
I love where
Okay,
this
so
is
keep going.
going, Robin. I love where
All
this
right,
is
good.
going.
Good. All right. So I'll keep going. I got a couple more that I think tarot is great at, and maybe then we'll switch to astrology and have an equal balance, right? Okay.
Okay.
So I love how tarot is portable and low tech, right? You could just stick a deck in your pocket. I carry a deck in my pocket, and I carry a handkerchief, a bandana, so that if
Hmm.
I'm at a restaurant, right, I can put it down, and then it's a nice clean space. And
Yes.
I love the fact that you don't have to have astrology. You're not on your phone. You're not like, looking at a book. You're not doing all this cognitive things. You're not drawing a chart. Like you can really connect directly with the person. And I'll say that a lot of these things I think are true also of Lenormand and also Oracle cards. Although Lenormand is less attractive in my experience. There's something about just mix to that one. I think tarot wins for imagery and art. And as much as I love astrology, I have a degree in the history of art. So I love all the art on tarot cards. Like Lenormand cards don't draw people in like tarot cards do, because it's a
Hmm.
picture of a mouse or a picture of a ring. And like, me, like a tarot is like a picture of a guy in the mud with 10 swords in his back,
Yes.
right? Or
Yes.
it's a picture of a skeleton on a horse, or it's a knight, or it's a beautiful lady. That's just like part of the genius of the Rider-Waite Smith, is that those symbols are also intuitive. But even if you go back to the Visconti Forza and those really old tarot decks from the Italian Renaissance,
Mm.
those are stunning. I mean, they're just works
Yes.
of, yeah. So,
Some of the remakes that are
off.
available
Oh,
today
yeah.
are just like, whoa. They're
Mhm.
super cool. And I feel like each one of my decks is an individual piece of art.
Mhm.
Uh, and they are, because,
Yeah.
they're so, I was, you know, giving myself a hard time the other day because I was filming a video and I was like, oh, this deck is so unique. And then I was like, why I say that about all my decks?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think we have a couple people saying, somebody says, I don't think there are enough Lenormand cards. I'll just mention when I made my own Lenormand deck, I think I added 6 cards. So I
You
agree with that, actually,
did.
that we could use a few little cards, right?
There are some expanded, I think Gilded Reverie has like an expanded
Mhm.
size. So yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's very cool. Um,
mhm.
so I mean, I think that's one of the things that's really cool about tarot versus astrology. So every astrology chart is kind of the same. And there are different, formats, and some have more colors and some have bigger symbols or whatever, but you're basically pulling roughly the same format every time. But with tarot, because every deck is made by a different artist, you have a chance to connect in with the artistry of that person and connect in with their energies, right? Are they dreamy? Are they sort of like gruesome? Are they super spiritual? Are they connected to the natural world? And as an artist myself, I love that it gives people a chance to interpret the energy for themselves, which means that then you can find a deck that has the right energy for you. And then different decks have different energy, right? Some decks may be great for relationship readings, and other decks are the ones you want to read when you're like sad, and other decks are super good for like advice. So I think that the variety of tarot is a big plus compared to astrology.
Absolutely. I feel like, can you do all readings with one deck? If that was all that there was, yes, of course, right? But I do find that certain decks lend themselves so nicely to certain spaces or topics. So, why not? Why not have a little bit of
Yeah,
variety?
yeah. And
Mhm.
Miriam says, I use the Star Tarot for guidance. I just pulled the Ace of Cups for myself. Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
that's beautiful.
So
Yes.
I think that's a beautiful aspect of tarot, which sort of astrology doesn't have as much, is the ability to really alter it. And I will say that along those lines, I appreciate the way that modern tarot artists have updated the tarot for the current times, right? There's like inclusive tarots. There's tarot where there's, equal numbers of male and female and non-binary people. There are modern tarots, and that has happened to some degree in astrology. So one of the problems we have in astrology is that most of the planets are named after male figures. So
Mm.
we did sort of update that by adding some asteroids that are named after women. And you and I talked about that. People can check out our other live for a little discussion about the different asteroids, the goddess asteroids.
Mhm.
But I feel like it's sort of like, well, we've added them on. Whereas when you do a tarot deck, you can completely redo them. You can have tarot decks that are entirely populated by animals. And
Yes.
I like the fact that it's sort of like in our society, artists are able to produce a tarot deck that really reflects their values and intuition. Whereas with astrology, we're sort of like building on a past foundation, but we can't sweep it away completely and replace it with something that we feel better about.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes a lot of sense. I was
yeah.
thinking, if I were to pull 3 cards from one deck and then pull those same 3 cards from a different deck, my message could be completely different just based
Yep.
on, the feel of the cards. Some of the decks really lend themselves to storytelling, which I love. So, yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
Mhm.
Okay, maybe I'll move on to some things that I think astrology is good at, since we've
Mm.
been checking them off my list here. Okay, yeah, I think astrology is good at. Okay, so one of the things I love about astrology, which is sort of the opposite of that idea that tarot is constantly updating itself, is that I think it's amazing personally to be able to go back and use techniques that people used like 3,000 years ago. Like the idea that I am part of this long lineage and we've been looking at the same planets ever since humans, developed on this planet, and that I can go back, like, so one of the things I do is people might be familiar with the idea of having a solar return, where on your birthday there's a solar return and you use that to talk about what the year is going to bring you. It's a standard birthday thing.
Yeah.
Modern idea is, well, you look at the solar return and it tells you something about the upcoming year. And then you might know, some of you who are here, that my school, I needed to take 2.5 things during those 2.5 years. And one is I studied a lot of other traditions. And I'll just give a pitch here. There's a guy named Professor Ali Alomi, and he has a Patreon called Head On History. Now, he has a lot of opinions about Israel and Palestine. So I'm not boosting those. Translates medieval astrology texts from Arabic from like 600 to 1200. And it turns out they had a whole expanded technique for solar revolutions. So I used to use the sort of like single chart, and then I joined his Patreon, and now he's translating these, and I'm like, oh, wow, there's like way more that these guys were doing. These people, they weren't guys, some of them are women as well, and they weren't all Arabic. They were writing in Arabic, but they were Jewish astrologers and Islamic astrologers, Persian astrologers. And I just think it's amazing that I can go back and look at the history of what's happened. And these are, literally, these techniques are like 1,200 to 1,000 years old. And then I'm going to give you a reading in a few weeks. And we're going to be using that technique for you.
Ooh.
And I'm just, as a history nerd, as somebody who loves research, as somebody who values the past, that just like sets off all my synapses.
Yes.
Now I see a question here from Trio of Witches Tarot. What do you think about the different types of astrology? Real sky, sidereal, and tropical. And thank you, Desiree. Yes, we did a 2-hour live with a lengthy discussion about what we thought about that. So if you check out Elizabeth's channel and you look at her live history, I think you'll be able to find that.
Mm-hmm.
2 hours of exactly what we think. The quick answer is that we think, well, I think they all have their benefits. and that none of them is right, whereas others are wrong. But for an individual person, one could be right for you at this time for what you have to learn. And so I think understanding the pros and cons of each and figuring out which one you want to use is really what's important.
And that's that it's okay to like go back and forth between depending on what you need. Yeah.
It's like having multiple tarot decks in some sense,
Yes.
right? They have different strengths. So, and I will say, I think that tarot also has an amazing history. And the history of tarot is not like tarot has no history, but astrology's history is way, way, way back for thousands of years. And tarot's history, I think we're at like 600 or 700 years at this point. I love astrology. And in addition to that, I love the fact that it's not just one type of astrology, right? There's Chinese astrology, there's Latin American astrology, there's the astrology of the Middle East. Like it's really something that you can do all over the world. And one of the most interesting astrology experiences I had was when we were in Los Angeles, and the Getty's a museum, and they had an exhibit of an astrology text from Latin America. It's a Mayan astrology text all about the phases of the moon. And it's actually the oldest book from Latin America. So it's the oldest manuscript, and it was exhibited at the Getty, and we got to go look at it. And I learned all about Mayan astrology, and I was like, this is great.
Yes.
Because I don't want to be thinking that my culture has a monopoly on good astrology, or that ours is the best, or that you have to do it our way. And I think that smart people have been doing astrology for thousands of years, and I want to learn what they had to teach me, and how can I incorporate that. So I learned, for example, that they thought that Venus was the planet of war, which is really different from what we usually use, because Venus is normally associated with like love and food and sex and joy. But then I discovered that actually the Mesopotamians associated the planet that we call Venus with their goddess Ishtar, who was the goddess of food and joy and sex, and also the goddess of war.
Yes, I've heard that as well. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. I see Clarity saying, thank you. This is interesting to listen to. I'm so glad you think. Oh, and Moon says, I go back and forth between sidereal and Western. More sidereal, but Western also works too. Yeah, I think they work for different things, actually, in some ways. Yeah. So anyway, so I love the idea that I'm not just stuck in my Western culture for astrology, and you can go out and learn from many other people who've studied the stars as well.
I feel like that's the beauty of being on a spiritual journey, is being able to interact with other people from other walks and other paths, and learning from people as we go. I'm a big fan of diversification, so yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, so I keep going with other pro astrology things.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so another thing I like about astrology is that you can build on past readings with a totally different practitioner. So for tarot, right, you pull a spread of cards for the moment, for the energies of the moment, for the message of the moment. And then if your client goes to another reader, they're going to pull a completely different set of cards, maybe, and have their own opinion about what's going on. And that can be good, but it can also be a little bit challenging for clients. It's like, well, the last reading I got on this relationship from so-and-so over there, they said X, and now we're here and we have a bunch of new cards, and the new person is, saying this and that. And I like the fact that when I read for people in astrology, I ask them, have you had an astrology reading before? Have you seen your chart? Does this look familiar to you? And then they'll say, maybe no, but a lot of times they're like, oh yeah, we talked all about my sun and my moon sign. I never realized my ascendant was important, but now I can see why I'm so touchy-feely, or now I know why I always have to do things my own way, or, and I'm like, great, let's jump in from where they left off. Right. So I think it's sorry, I'm just my thing here. I think it's really cool, the ability to say, well, this chart is who I am, and I carry this chart everywhere I go. And then every time I talk to another astrologer, I get a chance to take a look at my familiar chart that I know, and maybe find something new in it, or maybe discover something I'd never seen before, or maybe get another perspective. But I think there's this sort of like ascending level of mastery and knowledge as you learn about yourself by revisiting the same chart again with different people or in different circumstances.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love that.
Yeah. And I find that sometimes with tarot readings, people are like, oh, well, I talked to another tarot reader about this relationship like a year and a half ago, but I don't remember anything they said. And I'm like, oh, okay, right? Like we could start wherever, but it's sort of like now we're starting from the ground again. Whereas with astrology, it's like, oh yeah, I remember she said that about my Leo moon, and I told my husband about it, and he was like, yeah, that makes total sense. So I like the sort of like building in the same house,
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
thing for astrology, right?
Although from a person coming from the outside in, it could be overwhelming in the beginning to try to figure out like all the planets and the energies and the houses and what one means. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's,
Yeah.
I find it overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah. Well, this is a place where I think tarot wins, because
Mm.
in tarot, you could just pull one card, right? You could do one card, and then when you get comfortable with that, you could do a 3-card spread, right? So I like that about tarot, and we haven't gotten there yet, but I'll check this off my list. I think tarot wins when it comes to giving the client something to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're sitting down with somebody and you're like, here's a single card, right? Like, what do you see in that card? What is the message in that card? If somebody's like the person who came up to me at the barista in Moab, right? I was only going to pull one card for her because I don't want to overwhelm her. I'm not sure where she is. I'm not going to do a whole like Celtic cross with all the different cards and pull a giant spread, right? I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
we'll start one and we'll just figure that out. And so I think that that's a plus for tarot, because you can really meet people where they are. And especially decks like the Rider-Waite-Smith are so intuitive that you can just look at the symbols and figure something out. Like my husband knew nothing about tarot reading, and now 2.5 years later, he's actually pretty good at it. Just
Wow,
from
that's
like
so
watching
cool.
me do it and looking at the cards. And what I did is, instead of instantly doing the reading, I started every reading by asking him, well, what do you see in that card, honey? What does
Mm-hmm.
that card make you feel? What do you think? And now he's actually just sort of like picked it up just, by looking at the cards.
Mm-hmm.
I see people here. Agreed, I'm kind of overwhelmed. Yes, it's so confusing for beginners. And then Desiree, and the aspects are even more overwhelming. Okay, so I would like to address this. This is part of the tarot versus astrology. So
Okay.
as an astrologer, I totally get why people are overwhelmed by all of the symbols. And this has to do with one of these, like, I'm not overwhelmed by the symbols. I think I have some past lives as astrologers. Oh, any resources you can offer, Robin? I can offer a resource. If you go to my website, which is spiritsaid.com, and you go to there's a tab that says, literally, it says products and resources. It's products and resources. And the first drop-down menu is astrology cheat sheet. And I have a 1-page astrology cheat sheet there that is free. You can just download it. And it has like 3 or 4 keywords for all the planets, 3 or 4 keywords for all of the symbols, 3 or 4 keywords for all of the aspects. So you can definitely take a look at that. If you sign up for my mailing list, Elizabeth can attest, I send out like little like chunks of astrology. It's sort of like bite-sized chunks sometimes for people. But the other resource I would offer, and this is super important, is that you do not have to understand everything to get something out of astrology. People will tell you that. They're like, oh, you gotta understand the whole chart, or well, you really have to see the aspects, or that's all gatekeeping. It's all gatekeeping, because none of that developed all at once. Like the chart we have now is thousands of years of people saying, oh, let's add this, and oh, we'll add that, and hey, maybe the angles are important, and hey, we'll talk about the signs. If all you do is do the planet and the sign, you can still get amazing information from that. Like, you don't have to understand your whole chart. You can start with your sun or your Venus or your black moon Lilith, anything that appeals to you. Mm-hmm. Nobody understands their whole chart. I've been doing this for years, and I realized some things about my chart for the lecture today. I'm like, oh my God. Oh my gosh, this makes so much sense about my communication. And I've been communicating for 30 years. And I never figured it out. Literally, like last night, I figured this out. So don't let anybody tell you that you have to understand the things. You've got one planet. And think, how does this apply to my life? You don't. Or you could do the opposite. You could pick one planet and one house. Wow, I have Venus in my 6th house. What does that mean? Oh, relationships and creativity at work.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you need. I'll tell you, your Neptune house is the place where you have to forgive yourself for not living up to your own expectations.
Ooh.
Whatever house, just look at your chart. Neptune's the one that looks like a trident, like a pitchfork, like a little pitchfork symbol. The cheat sheet has the symbols on it, by the way, so you'll have that too.
I love that cheat sheet.
Oh, thank you. I tried making it. Yeah, it was a challenge to fit everything onto one sheet, but I'm like, I don't want people to be overwhelmed. There's just one sheet. So anyway, so yeah, your Neptune house is a place where you have big dreams and you never achieve them all. So like I have Neptune in my 9th house of spirituality, and I had dreams of having like a whole spiritual like school, which I won't achieve, but you still end up achieving a lot. It's just not what you'd expected. So that's simplicity. Like just pick one planet and one house and open up your intuition. Anybody who's here is a tarot reader. You all have amazing intuition. Don't let yourself get overwhelmed. There's no hurry. It's better to understand less and not be overwhelmed than to jump into understanding more. This is like the first day of algebra class, or, you know, the first day you started learning a different language like Spanish. Mm-hmm. Just super simple and let your intuition help you. That's what I love
that. It looks like a lot of people are downloading it now. So
yes, awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Desiree, for putting that link in the chat. I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
I will say there are more of these cheat sheets on my Patreon. I have quite a few of them. This is the basic one, which is free for everybody, but I have other ones for like synastry and, you know, relationships and planetary strength and a lot of fortune and stuff like that. So yeah. Claire says, I love when a deck has the astrological symbols on it and just knowing there are 4 elements to the suits and the astrology symbols are split into 4 elements. I agree. And we could do a whole live on tarot and astrology and how they combine, which is another really cool topic.
So good.
We care about that. Yeah. Okay, if anybody wants to ask any more questions about how not to get overwhelmed by astrology. Because the next thing where I think astrology wins is actually exactly that complexity. So I understand that the complexity is hard for beginners, but also the fact that astrology is so complex means that it's ever expanding. So you can cosmos, like the galactic center. And there's a whole, so because you're actually looking at the cosmos that we're a part of, as science develops our understanding of, keeps leveling up. Like all those goddess asteroids, they weren't even discovered until, I don't know exactly, 1920s, I think. Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, nobody knew those existed thousands of years ago, you know, or in the medieval times when all of those brilliant astrologers were working in what is now Iran and Iraq. So it's like, as we keep understanding more, astrology keeps developing higher and higher. And I think that tarot keeps developing too, but it is sort of like, you got the 72 cards from the Italian Renaissance and the art keeps developing. But I just feel like the astrology has a leg up when it comes to linking divination with sort of scientific discoveries.
I can see that.
As an astrologer, that's my perspective.
Yeah, I can see that. I do feel like tarot has so many different layers. And tarot can be overwhelming for people when they first start. You know, they don't know where to jump in. You know, there's the numerology, and then there's color associations, and then there's the 4 elements. And, you know, there's so many bits and pieces. And like they were saying in the chat, sometimes there's the astrology piece that is somewhere on the card. And you can continually grow and develop over time. No one jumps into tarot and knows all the things at once. You know, everybody starts little by little, just understanding the basic core meanings of the cards and adding on to it little by little. Then you realize, oh, if I learn a little bit more about numerology, then maybe I can vary my readings just a little bit or get deeper with my readings. And maybe if I learn a little bit about chakras and about the colors, maybe I could pull that in. And maybe if I learn about the planets, I could pull that in. Or I learn about the Kabbalah, I could put that in. There's just so many different layers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a really interesting point here that Desiree is bringing up. And thank you for those of you who are so active in the chat. It gives us a lot to work on. It's wonderful to have you here. So Desiree says, I feel that tarot, and my apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong. What's happening to me is I'm reading the chat and it's like highlighted in the background. So
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Desiree, there's a sense of like cards. We have cards as little kids. We have games with cards that we play. The cards fit in your pocket. They're little pictures created by other. Connect that. For me, every time I pull that card, I'm going to have like a meltdown, right? Like you develop your own meanings where the cards mean certain things to you that maybe they don't mean to other people because of how your practice is developing. And it can be challenging with astrology because now you're like, okay, well, this is a planet up in the sky. It's like millions of miles away. Oh, Desiree says that I'm freezing. I'm sorry about that.
During that last section, that last bit, yeah, where you were just what you were just sharing.
Yeah, so I'll repeat that, and feel free to like let me know if that happens. I'm sorry, my internet is not great today. So what I was saying was that I think that tarot can become very personal because it's a deck of cards. They belong to you. You keep them in your pocket. You develop your own meanings that go with them. We all play with cards as kids. And astrology can be sort of intimidating because this is like Jupiter is a planet 494 million miles away, right? This is the energy of our environment. The planets are doing their things. And you see a lot of, honestly, I think it's kind of crappy stuff online about like, Pluto is entering Aquarius. Is this the hour of doom? Or like, watch out for the Mars-Saturn conjunction coming April 15th. What does this mean for US politics? And I'm just like, so there is this degree to which tarot, I think, feels like sort of a nice little comfort zone. And astrology can seem sort of scary, which it's not supposed to be scary, but some people use it that way from a clickbait perspective. And also astrology is good for predicting danger or difficulty. So like I'm not surprised that I'm having trouble because this is sort of unexpected and I thought that might happen. So I think astrology asks you to confront difficulty, danger, or fear, which tarot also can. Like I ran a fortune telling booth for my sister's Halloween party a few years ago. And I didn't use anything at all. I just was reading people straight. And somebody came into me and he said, if you know when I'm going to die, don't tell me, okay? And I was like, okay, thank you. I will make sure I don't tell you. And he's like, because my grandmother went to a tarot reader and she pulled the death card. And then my grandfather died 2 weeks later. So I know this is real.
Oh, gosh.
I know, right? That's why I love running these fortune. About any demise, I find any doubt. But it's like they ask us to confront the fact that life is not always easy and that difficult things happen. And astrology, you're like, well, tick, tick, tick. This is a good period, but your Mars square starts on May 1st. And that's going to be a month and a half of difficulty for you. And I feel like it's one of these things where it's like we have to be brave, and we have to be willing to confront the fact that our cycles go up and down in life. But there is a lot to be said for tarot where it's sort of comforting. Although I did one of my very first tarot readings, I burst into tears. It was a past, present, future reading. I just burst into tears, and my spirit guides were like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I want the past to be my future, and I want the future card to be my past.
Oh my
And that was
gosh.
the message that I had to talk. They were to talk to me through it. They were like, well, why does this future sound so bad? I'm like, because this future means I'm a failure and the past is a lot better. They're like, well, that might be what your parents said, but it's not really true. You know, it's like, it brings out these difficulties. And I think tarot and astrology are both good at helping you understand
For
what you're struggling
sure.
with and
And, you know,
supporting you through it.
it's an important point, you know, the same as you were saying with astrology, that you don't have to start big, right? You can
Yeah.
start with just one planet and where that planet is on your chart and kind of go from there. And here in the chat, Trio of Witches Tarot, hello, welcome, and thank you for being here. Says tarot can be simple too. You don't have to bring in all the different esoteric layers, right? In order to get the messages. Those layers can feel like a barrier to keep people out. And I think that can happen with both tarot and astrology. Aquarius
Yeah.
Tarot Adventures, hello and welcome. And I love what you shared about like playing cards, because in my family, game playing was quite popular. It was something that, you know, the men all got together and they, you know, played games while the ladies, you know, made coffee and the kids
Yeah,
ran
right.
around and did all the things. And, you know, of course, dominoes was real big, but they played cards a lot. And probably one of this is a deck that you know, I took from my dad, but it was one of the first decks that I ever encountered. And you're going to see
Wow.
that there's a lot of figures here that you're like, oh, now that I'm so familiar with working with the tarot, I'm like, holy cow, I grew up with these cards my whole life.
Yep, that's a pip deck right there.
Yes, if I ever
Yeah,
saw one.
very
So,
cool.
yeah, grew up with these my whole
Yeah.
life. And so maybe that's why when I first grabbed the tarot, they felt familiar. I don't know.
Well, I have a similar story. So when I was little, I rode horses. And my grandfather sent me at one point a framed picture of a young person on a horse, sort of a like Renaissance style young person on a horse, with a framed picture, which he got from the Morgan Library. They lived in New York, so he went to the Morgan Library, and he said, "I saw this picture, and it reminded me of you." This is my grandfather. I was a horseback rider. Reminded me of you, and he sent this to me. And this is one of my prized possessions. I probably got this when I was 8. I still have it. I've carried it around. And at one point, I was doing research for a presentation I was giving on the history of tarot. And I was looking at this, I think the Visconti Sforza deck, which is one of the very earliest tarot decks from the Italian Renaissance. And I was looking at some of the other pictures, and I was like, that looks like that picture of the horseback rider that my grandfather sent me when I was 8. And he sent me the Page of Swords.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it's a reproduction of the Page of Swords from that deck, which is housed in the Morgan Library when I was 8. So that's 46 years ago, no, 42 years ago, or no, 44 years ago. He sent me that, and it turned out to be a tarot card.
That is so cool.
Yeah, I was
Mhm.
totally. So yeah. Okay, so I want to ask a question. This is something that I wasn't sure whether tarot was better or astrology was better, and maybe we've got some people in the audience who can help us out here.
Mhm.
So, how does tarot work for health readings? As an astrologer, people ask me, like, should I have surgery at this time? Or I have this back pain and the doctors can't find anything wrong. What should I do? Is that something you can do with tarot, where you can work with people on their health and give
That
recommendations?
that is so interesting because that's another topic that, like me as a reader, I tend to stay away from. And I actually
Mhm.
say that, like, I won't entertain legal questions or health questions or third party questions. So
Yeah.
not to say that it doesn't happen, or that I've never ever done it before, because that's not true. I have, you know, I have done it before. But it's not something that I would typically do, is read on someone's health.
Mhm.
But I do know that people do go to astrology and
Yeah.
you know, and actually Lenormand too, I feel like people use that for those kind of questions.
Yeah. So Desiree says, I have not read on health. The interesting thing about astrology is that before the development of modern medicine, it was the primary way that people made healthcare diagnoses. Like astrology
Whoa.
was the number one way that people in I shouldn't say, I don't know if this is true in the East. Maybe it's not true in China, and it might not be true in South America. But when you're talking about like, you know, um, like Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome. Oh, hey, so Trio of Witches Tarot says, I read for a woman once and the cards all pointed to a serious health issue. I told her she should see a doctor and she said she had been diagnosed with cancer that very day.
Oh.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that example with us. We really appreciate that. Yes, Desiree, right. So astrologers read the chart, and there's a whole history in astrology of recommending herbs and remedies for healing, because that was one of the primary methods of diagnosis they had in the days before, like blood work and CAT scans and things like that. Okay. Kyle's asking help guidance on what's going on. We're comparing tarot and astrology is what we're talking about. Oh, and Trio of Witches says, followed up on how she could support herself. Yeah, so we're comparing tarot and astrology and talking about which one we think is better for which type of reading or certain types of client experience. Yeah.
Yes, I also, yes, we're not doing live readings today, but I'm sure, you know, there will be quite a few channels a bit later on that are likely going to be doing those. And I hope that you find the help that you need, Kyle.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so before blood work and CAT scans and X-rays and all kinds of diagnostic techniques that we have today, we used astrology. And I will say that part of the reason I got into astrology was that Western medicine couldn't diagnose what was wrong with me. And what was wrong with me was that I would basically get healthy every time I moved to the East Coast, and then I would get sick every time I moved back to the West Coast. And after this happened like 3 different times, and all the doctors, there's nothing wrong with you, your blood work is normal, you know, nothing was ever found. I was like, okay, there's got to be some way to understand health outside of Western medicine and outside of, you know, there are a lot of sort of like alternative practitioners, but they had nothing to say about this location thing. And so that's another thing I think that I think for me, astrology is a winner, is helping you understand what your energies are like in different locations.
Mm.
Now, I know you can do a tarot reading. So like I've done side-by-side tarot readings, like what will it be like if I move here versus what will it be like if I move there? And I think that that's very valuable, but that's different from relocating your natal chart to a different location and being able to say, okay, I'll get to that question in geomancy. It's a question, Desiree. That's different from being able to say, well, like for Steve, my husband, well, you're going to be introverted in Colorado, but you're going to be more extroverted if you move to York, for example. So what we're doing here really is relocating the natal chart as though you were born in a new location. So this is related to astrocartography, which is a part of that. But when you relocate the natal chart, you actually get a whole lot of information. Now, geomancy, Desiree is asking about geomancy. Geomancy has 2 meanings. So one meaning is it's a general category of being able to understand the energies in a specific location. So that could include like dowsing. It could include being sensitive to the energy of a place. It can include like ley lines if you are an expert in things like that. But there is a different term for geomancy, which is a specific type of divination from North Africa, which basically involves drawing lines originally in the sand or dirt, which is why it's called geomancy. And that is actually a specific divination technique, which I do use, actually. I use that for clients when I get questions that are like yes, no questions.
Oh, interesting.
But neither one of those is locational astrology. Oh, yeah. So locational astrology is like, how are you going to be impacted by this location? Which is important because the same person might be impacted. Like my mother, like we were going to move to Paris. We're on a nomadic journey. And my mother was like, oh, I hate Paris. And she had this list of reasons why she hates Paris. But I love Paris, and Paris is amazing for me, and a lot of people do. So it's not the locations of Paris per se, it's how the locations of Paris will affect you as an individual. which then allows you to figure out whether Paris is a good place to move or have a partnership or something like that.
Yes. And actually, oh, Robin, you're so knowledgeable. And yes, yes, she is. I actually am going to be meeting with Robin soon because I am going to be doing my solar return with her. And one of the things I asked about was I'll be doing some traveling in 2026, and I'm going to be visiting a few very specific locations. So we're going to be looking at some of that, and I'm looking forward to it because it's fascinating to know that, maybe you're not successful in your current location, and you do need to start off fresh somewhere new. So yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Another thing that's really cool about that, and I'll say this is something else we have on my Patreon. There's a lecture about locational astrology and relocating your chart. And then my Spirit Said Style YouTube channel has a tutorial for how to relocate your chart if you're interested in this. So another thing that's interesting about this is that you actually don't have to move to a place in order to have those fresh new energies, because not everybody has the ability to move, right? So you can actually get the beneficial energies of a location by partnering with somebody who lives there, or listening to music from that place, or eating food from that place. So like the Middle East is for me. So once I discovered this astrology from the medieval Middle East, I was like, that's full astrology I've been looking for. And then periodically I'm like, I need my food. Tzatziki. I just need Middle Eastern decor and Middle East. So once you find your good location, you can actually bring those energies in, just by putting a picture of that on your screensaver. Yeah. So,
or even like wearing jewelry.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to say something I think tarot's better at.
Okay.
I love the fact that tarot allows you to create your own spread by deciding what the cards are going to mean before you draw them.
Oh, yes. Yep.
That is just like as much as I think astrology is amazing because we get to piggyback on these scientific discoveries, I think tarot is like the unlimited potential of the human imagination.
That is so true. And I've never really thought about it that way, but yeah. And there's a lot of people that don't read with spreads. I enjoy spreads periodically, and so I don't have a problem with them. And yeah, I love that, and I love to go down, get my insights from the cards, and then go back and make sure that I'm pulling the insight based on the question that was asked.
Ooh, can you tell me?
So I just did this last night because I do a lot of dream work. And my guides are very active when I sleep. And so I get most of my messages through dreams. So I had nap yesterday. I woke up. I had a powerful dream. And so I had my questions and I pulled out my cards. So the first thing I do is just kind of look at the cards, pull the meaning, make some initial notes, and go through the whole thing. And then I go back and then I look at it. Okay, is that really answering that question? And if I need to tweak, because I do this, when I do it in writing, right? I like to journal them, but I usually do it in the uh, on my computer electronically. So I'll go back in and I'll tweak my notes based off of what I saw. So I look at the card, and for me, uh, I'm slow to build my energy. So the longer that I sit and the more connections that I start to make, the more reflections I start pulling out. And then I go back and I just add all those little nuggets into the reading. And then by the time I'm done, it's like this whole big thing.
Wow.
Mhm.
That sounds amazing. It sounds a little bit like cooking in some sense, where you have all your ingredients, right? And they're all chopped up, and then you start combining them and building the layers of flavor and the spices and creating this incredible meal for yourself. Yeah, I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
I have this weird thing where I love the idea of a spread and the idea of like giving the card a job, but somehow I don't actually do that when I
And
which may be because I spend so much.
I don't always, but I do sometimes. I think there's like Trio of Witches saying, it depends on the question.
Mhm.
So for some things I might say, I feel like I need 3 cards. No, that's not enough. I need some more. But then
Yeah.
for other things, I'm like, no, I think I want to use a spread for this.
Yeah. I think maybe for me, it's because I spend so much time thinking about astrology, which is very structured and all the houses have a meaning and all the planets have a meaning, that when I do tarot, I just want to be like free. I want to just be like,
Yes.
whoever comes in, I'll just pull a card and see what happens. But I did do a presentation at one point on tarot and runes, combining runes with tarot. And
Ooh.
for that, I found it was very helpful to give the tarot a job and the runes a separate job, right? Like the tarot is going to tell me what energies are at play in the situation, and the runes are going to give me advice about what I should do to handle it.
I
Right?
love that.
The tarot is going to tell me what each person is acting on, and then the runes are going to tell me what their hidden feelings or motives are that they're not aware of. And I felt that was helpful. So this is interesting. Astrology seems mostly masculine and tarot seems feminine. So interesting. I'd be interested in why. I mean, traditionally, astrology is very structured. And that's in part because there's a lot of sort of random and chaotic things going on in the universe. And so when you structure it, you have a better chance to actually figure something out. But I think that tarot definitely has sort of a deep well of intuition, which people traditionally associate with feminine things. Yeah, interesting question. The one thing I will say is Steve and I are having this discussion of healing astrology versus practical astrology. And I have found that astrology is very healing, in part because it helps you really recognize who you are as an individual and to dive into those parts of your own identity that that maybe are like, sort of like you don't feel so good about them, or you're not sure who you are, or somebody made you feel bad about those as a kid. And that for me is very healing. Both feminine and masculine and non-binary energies can be healing as well. Yeah, very cool. Okay, so all right, here's another thing. I'd be interested, since we have these questions. So I like one interesting things to me as an astrologer is the ability to read the charts of family and understand how those people connect with each other. So I'll just give an example of this. So I got a lot of messages, I've already said about this as a kid, that I needed to limit myself. I should be less friendly. I should be less happy. I should be more focused. I should be less talkative with strangers. And I felt very guilty about this because I was like, oh no, I'm too out there. I'm not structured enough. I'm too trusting. I'm too gullible. And then I realized that I'm the only person in my family who has the planet Saturn not in detriment or fall. So this is important because the planet Saturn is a planet that helps us figure out what are healthy limits, right? Like it's good to have some limits. You shouldn't eat a tub of ice cream every night. You shouldn't always say everything you think. Sometimes you should, some thoughts are thinking thoughts and other thoughts are speaking thoughts. But we can also get into trouble when we limit ourselves in ways that are not healthy, right? Like somehow no thoughts are speaking thoughts because you are always afraid to say anything, right? Or you never have any ice cream or any delicious food because you're so strict with your diet that you only eat things and you sort of miss out on the beautiful experiences of food that we get, being incarnated on the planet. And so what I realized when that have been trying to put on me because I don't limit myself the way they do. I'm like, no, I have to be confident in my own limits and help them to stop limiting themselves in unhealthy. Oh, am I frozen again? Did you lose me?
Frozen. I heard most
Okay.
of what you said, so I don't know if the viewers are able to at least hear what you said, but you were talking about the placement of Saturn, and you were the only one in your family who had it in an optimal location, yet you were made to
Right.
feel like you were the one with the issue.
Right, exactly. Which is agreed on their version of Saturn. And it's like I was the odd person out.
Mm.
Actually, I was the healthy one. And I think this is really important. So I was reading for a client the other day, and she has a lot of positive energy for spirituality, but I could see that that would be a problem for her kids. And so I told her, I'm like, you should totally do your spiritual thing, but don't push anybody else into it. Don't, like, it's not for other people in your family. And she's like, oh, yeah, guilty as charged. Good
Mm.
point. I need to not push them into it. And so I love the fact that you can see how people in families connect and then help them build positive relationships. So that's easy in astrology because you can compare people's charts. How do we handle that in tarot? Has anybody read for families, read for parents about their kids? How does that work
I think
in
that's
tarot?
gonna fall into the third party reading. So
Uh-huh.
I think the only time I've done it is if we have the consent of the other person in
Mhm.
order to tap into their energy. And there's a
Yeah.
huge divide on that, I think, in the community. I think there's people that are like, nope, I read on the energies, and if that energy comes up, it comes up.
Mhm.
I kind of I tend to rephrase the audio was cutting in and out. Okay. Um I tend to rephrase the question so that we're reading on the person, not
Mhm.
external energies. But sometimes messages want to come through anyways,
Mhm.
and you just have to, go with it, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it's just one of those things that happen. I had someone once that came for a reading. They wanted to know if their partner was cheating.
Oh, that's a tough reading.
You know,
Yeah.
you know, like, and I was just like, oh my God, like it was very overwhelming. And when you're doing readings, and I don't know if this is the same with astrology, but I find when you're tapping into your intuition and doing the readings, it drains your energy.
Mhm.
And so sometimes after a profound reading like that, I find that, okay, let's just pause here. Like I can't continue anymore because I'm spent. I feel like I'm spent after some of the readings. But yeah, uh, I fall into the I prefer not to read on someone's energy unless I have their consent.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I mean, I think that's a question that we all sort of think about as readers. So I generally am okay reading for parents about their children,
Mm,
unless the children are of age, in which case I typically ask for permission. And the same thing is true of partners and things like that. But I sort of like, I do a little bit of like, what do I think is really for the highest good?
mm,
Like, there are sometimes questions where like somebody is asking, how can I get along with a family member? Like an
yes.
adult
Yeah.
family member, but
Mm,
they don't want to ask the family member for permission for whatever reason, because astrology is not their thing or their relationship isn't great. But they know the family member's birthday, because it's a family member. So they're like, oh yeah, she was born on such and such a day in this location. So sometimes what I do in that situation is I pull up the chart myself and I make some recommendations then based on my knowledge of this person's chart for how my client can get along with that person or have a better conversation or whatever. But I don't
mhm.
share the chart with the client, and I don't like look at the chart or ideate the chart or talk about the moon and such or give out any sort of like personal
No,
personal.
you give the actual querent what they need in order to manage the energy better.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, from taking a look at her chart, I know that this person probably gets overwhelmed by too many words. So you're going to do a better job of communicating this if you, or whatever it is. It's like I trust myself to keep the confidence of the person who did not give permission for the purpose of helping, mainly because I believe that this family member would like to have a better relationship, right? It's not like, question is, how can I get this person to give me all of their treasure, right? Or how can I get this person to sign over their house to me or something like that? So it's sort of like, do I think it's for the highest good for me, for both of these people, for me to have this information even without permission? But I admit that that's kind of an iffy, like it's a judgment call,
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I say, like, I have like certain, I want to say rules, but like boundaries, but have I ever crossed them? Probably, like it depends on the situation. It depends on the person, that's asking, there's just so many variables and factors.
Here was an interesting thing. This is an interesting question. So when I first got into divination, I was very concerned that I was somehow convincing myself that I was getting messages when I wasn't. And that was a family thing. Like, you can't trust it. Those people are charlatans. It's all made up. Well, you're just good at reading people, like that sort of thing. And so I specifically sought out situations where I didn't think I could just be reading somebody, like cold reading their energy, or I didn't think that I could convince myself of something that wasn't really true. And I wanted testable situations where I had to give a reading and then it would either be true or it wasn't going to be true. Not like, well, I believe you're going to be facing a challenge in your life, right? Because everybody's facing a challenge in their lives. So yeah, so I started reading for people on the internet in Facebook groups where they drew the cards. So when I draw my own cards, of course, my spirit guides guide me in the shuffling, and they tell me, like, I fan the cards out, and my spirit guides are literally like, pick that one, pick this one, pick this one. So I know that my spirit guides are creating the right type of card to come up, like that card that was the Lovers reversed in Moab. My spirit guide specifically guided me to that card in the deck, and I pulled it out, and I'm like, oh. But when people draw their own cards, you have no idea what their process is, right? Are they in tune with their spirit guides? Are they just shuffling 10 times every time? Like, did they reject the first 3 readings and now this is the spread they like, and so now they're asking you to read?
I don't like that card. Throw that aside. Exactly. Keep going.
Yeah. And so somebody from my Etsy shop actually sent me a picture of a reading and said, I drew these cards and I'm trying to figure out whether the person that I'm interested in is interested back. And they had a grand tableau and they had, I think, a 3-card spread. And they're like, I just don't know how to interpret this. And I was like, well, I can tell you that according to the reading, the person is not interested back. Yeah. So from what the reading says is that the person has sort of some interest in you, but they're probably more like a friend in your orbit rather than oh, actually, we really care about each other. And that had to do with whether the cards were facing each other in their position in the grand tableau. And I was like, but I don't know what your process was in choosing these cards, so I can't vouch for that side of things. That's what I was comfortable with. I was like, what? So I see a question here, Winds of Reflection. I'm curious how you feel about being in the position of giving astrology readings to others. Has it been challenging for you in any way? Okay. All right. Hopefully my audio is back at this point. Are we good?
I hear you on my side. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
It cuts in and out.
Yeah. So I will say I could try moving this just a little bit.
And I saw Sandy in the chat. Hi, Sandy, and welcome. Sandy's in the UK as well.
Oh, really? Hi, Sandy. I'm in York. I've been in York since January, and we're until May, and then we're in Bristol for a month, and then we're going to be in Ireland, Cork, Ireland, for 2 months.
Oh, so cool.
Okay, maybe this will be better. Fingers crossed.
Okay.
So I will say that the process of giving readings, astrology readings to others is sort of like the tale of two cities, right? It's the best of times and it's the worst of times. And I say that with good humor because I love it. I love doing it. I love being able to pull out information that they can't get anywhere else, right? Like there's some things, like for me, when I was like, why do I keep getting sick every time I moved back to the West Coast? Nobody could tell me. And like astrology used to be used to predict the weather. Now we have weather satellites, which do an amazing job. And so we don't need that for astrology anymore. But there are other things like, how am I going to figure out the trouble spots in my marriage? Like marriage counseling with synastry astrology is next level above just sitting with a counselor. Okay, I see spiritual rain. If I'm going to be in Cork, I should hook up with Jackie's crystal moon. Okay, I will look that up.
Jackie, and I don't know if she's in the chat today. She attended the first live, Jackie's crystal moon. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That would be great. Thank you for that recommendation. So I love the idea that I can give people information. Like this mom was like, how do I deal with my children's energy? She has two kids. They have very different energy. We were able to look at their charts together, and I can give all kinds of recommendations for this is where you're compatible. This is where you're going to have trouble. This is where you should stand firm. This is where you should take a softer approach. So I love that. And I feel really honored to be entrusted with a tradition that gives such practical, helpful information. Like it's revitalized our marriage. It's helped us figure out where to live. But I also find it terrifying. And every time I sit down with somebody, I'm like, oh, I hope I can figure it out this time. I hope I don't say something that makes them angry. I hope I don't trip over some childhood trauma in an insensitive way and accidentally, say something that makes them upset. But I'll say that I felt this way about being an SAT tutor as well. So I have a lot of trauma from my childhood around my communication and this message that I should be limiting myself more and I shouldn't be open and I shouldn't be sharing what I can do and I shouldn't be giving all my knowledge. And so I think a lot of the trouble I have with astrology readings is more about me because I had that trouble when I was tutoring children on how to improve their SAT scores. Terrified for everyone's. But the other thing is I feel really lucky to be able to bring insights into a world where I think we've lost a lot of our advising. Back in the day, people had extended families, they had elders that they lived with, there were shamans, there were mystical workers that helped people have this sort of insight. And a lot of people in modern society are very isolated and alone. Yes. And they don't have people like this person who came up to a random stranger in a bar and said, will you please pull a tarot card for me? Like, who else does she have to advise her on this marriage?
Exactly.
Situation?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's true of tarot as well. It's sort of like an honored position to be able to advise others. Plus, it's just amazingly cool to have insight and you just are like, I'm kind of getting that maybe you're getting a little bored at work. And honestly, you're like worried about your boss, but really the problem is you're actually bored. People are like, that's so true. How did you know that? And I'm like, well, I mean, there's stuff in your chart that made you think that, but also, you're working with your intuition. Like,
yeah,
it's just at work, I think. Yeah.
It's really cool. I feel like both have, pros and cons and benefits. And if you can combine both, that's amazing. But yeah, both have something to lend.
All right. Should I keep going down my list?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So here's a question. This is another one that had a question mark for me.
Okay.
Right. Okay. The question is, how do tarot and astrology compare on Materia Magica? So when I say Materia Magica, I mean like crystals, herbs, colors that allow you to take your reading and make it into a ritual or a spell or a working of some sort. So I'll just give an example. I have a weak moon and my weak moon rules my lot of fortune. So having a weak moon is always not good, but if it rules your lot of fortune, that's especially not good. And that's a big part of the reason that I was so unhealthy on the West Coast.
Yes.
And I got healthy every time I moved to someplace where I had a better lot of fortune. So I am wearing my moon jewelry here. You can see.
Oh, that's so pretty.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
So this is basically a chunk of an oyster shell with pearls that are inside of the shell. And by the way, I found this in the rock shop in Moab, Utah, where I was reading for that barista.
Oh, that's
So I've
so
got
cool.
that. I know, right? And then I've got this, which is also made out of mother of pearl. It's a little Chinese character. And then I have this, which I think is unakite, maybe, or something like that. But anyway, it's a speckled stone and it's good for Mercury.
Oh, I
So
love
today,
Unakite. I
yeah,
love
so
it.
today I wanted to have good energy for being healing and loving and kind, but also for communication. So I got out my lunar stuff, which I wear all the time, actually.
Mhm.
And then I added this Mercury stone, which I had on an altar. And it's enhancing my communication energy because I've got another lecture later this evening. Do you do that with tarot? Do people do tarot rituals and spells? Are there stones that go with specific tarot cards? How does that work?
I
Thank you, guys.
think,
Thank you for giving me your positive on my jewelry.
yes, me in particular, yes, I like to combine. I like to
Okay.
combine, and I know a lot of people do, but I think it's individual to the person. Everybody has their own, spiritual practices. I, for example, love to crystal grid. And so I crystal grid and I don't limit myself to crystals. I use crystals, I use seashells, I use my mini tarot cards with my gridding, and I also use herbs in my grids. So, oh, Desiree, okay, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, we really appreciate your positive contributions and being so involved in the chat. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, so I love to do all that, put it together, create a sense of ritual when I am an intention, right? Ritual and intention into the tools that I'm working with, no matter what those tools are. Right now, I'm wearing this bracelet right here. And this bracelet has all the stones that are supportive for Aries.
Oh, wow.
And
Very
so,
cool.
since we're in Aries season, I wanted to make sure to wear that. I also have the bracelet that you made for me to help me with my placements. And that's like hands down one of my favorites. I use it all the time. So yes, I like to incorporate uh, all those things in I think in the fall, I like to experiment a little bit with kitchen witchery and different things like that. So, yeah.
So are there specific stones or colors associated with specific tarot cards? Anybody know about that?
That is a great question. And maybe there is. I'm not sure. I know it is for astrology that there's certain colors for planets and metals and different things. That's probably a layer of tarot that I haven't gotten into yet.
Yeah. Yeah, so I know you can definitely associate, crystal grids and stones with tarot cards. That's a plus for tarot, by the way, which is that actual cards allow you to create a ritual or make an altar
Hmm.
or take photographs or make collages. And you can do that with astrology symbols too, but I think it's not quite as cool. I think just tarot cards have the leg up on the specific things. But I do find that the Materia Magica that goes with the planets is very effective. And I have a lot of experience looking at clients' charts, hearing about like a chronic life problem that they have, the same pattern over and over again, tying that to a planet in detriment or in a bad house, and then recommending certain stones or colors or crystals or foods and having people say, it's better now. I'm better at getting my thoughts together, or I'm more disciplined, or for me, working with my moon has really helped my self-care and become aware when I'm being hard on myself and helped me like embrace my healing energies. And I wondered whether people do that with tarot by just making their own connection or whether they're actually like sort of historic connections between stones and tarot cards and things like that.
Mm. That's a great question. So if there's anyone in the chat that is using tarot in that way, feel free to share. We'd love to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Or for anybody who watches this live stream later, if you want to make a comment and let us know, because we've reached a spot where neither one of us knows about it.
Yes, for sure. Yes.
Yeah, that would be great. Very cool. I had one more thing. Oh, what was it? Here's something where I think that tarot wins. So one of the things that I like to do with tarot is to imagine myself inhabiting the archetype of the tarot card in a certain situation.
Oh, yes.
Right? Because the tarot cards are mostly people. Not every deck is people, but a lot of decks are people. Sorry. I see there's a little joke here about Guinness in a clear form. That's because I took a sip of water from this. This is, we're in this Airbnb in York, and they had this beautiful Guinness glass with a heart on it. So yeah, that's what the clear Guinness says.
That's so funny.
Okay, the Trio of Witches tarot says that Noble Moon tarot does associate crystals with the cards. Excellent. Yeah. Claire T, I'm glad you're thinking about this. I'm glad you're enjoying our session. So one of the things I love to do is I deal a lot with anxiety, and I have a lot of fears about, not being good enough or not having enough strong energy, or I can't do this. And part of that is because my spiritual state is sort of porous. And so I hear a lot from negative energies that have a tendency to tell me I'm bad at stuff, or I suck at something, or it's not going to go well. And so sometimes I'll be lying in bed at night, and the next day I'm worried about oh no, I have to give a lecture the next day, or oh, the next day I have to have a conversation, or oh, the next day I've got to figure out how to join a YouTube live with my cell phone. I've never done that before. And I just imagine the Knight of Wands, right? Or the Knight of Swords. And I just am okay, I vision the card in my head, and I imagine that Knight of Swords energy charging into the fray, intellectually fearless, waving the sword and cutting away any sorts of obstacles. And I'm just I am going to be that person when I sit down to figure out the cell phone thing, right? Or I go into a situation and I'm sort of unsure of myself, and I'm nope, I am the Empress. I am the Empress. I am the goddess of fertility. I am totally calm. I don't have to prove myself to this person. I can just have an abundance of positive energy and let them be them, and I don't have to rescue them. And I think that that's really a great thing about tarot, is it gives you this whole fan of positive people that you can sort of draw from.
Yes, I love that. And that is so true, because we do this all the time, right? As we prepare for different things, okay, I need to embody my inner, whatever it is, for this meeting or for this interaction. So yes, it is so true. But I mean, I'm guessing you could do the same with planet. Today, I'm going to channel Mars energy, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. So you totally can do that with the planets. And that's part of why I do things wear my moon jewelry, because and this is a place in some sense where astrology might win, which is that the tarot deck is like a set of cards, but then you have the moon. You could literally go outside and you could look at the moon, and the moon, the energy of the light reflecting off of the moon is an actual physical, natural energy that you can connect with, as opposed to an archetype or a picture. But I think that people struggle with that a bit, because they get so overwhelmed by well, but it's the moon, but then I have my moon in Scorpio, but then it's in the 6th house, and what does that mean? And I think people get stuck in this sort of cognitive side of astrology. I have to understand all the symbols, and what is this and what is that. And so one of the things I really urge people to do when they are struggling with a certain energy is just go out and look up at the sky and absorb the energy of Venus, or the energy of Mars, or the energy of the moon. And I think that that's very powerful, but I also think that, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but I think in our society, we're sort of more primed to look at a picture on a card and say, oh yeah, I could be that knight, than we are to go outside and find a pinprick in the sky and say, I'm absorbing the energy of that pinprick into my body. And
Mhm.
maybe in past societies where natural elements were more real to people, or people had a different sort of spiritual training that allowed them to believe in the energy of the planets more, maybe they were better at that. But like we spend a lot of time in school looking at pictures. And so I think that's sort of like you got to level up to the point where you become sensitive to the energy of the planets. Yeah, we see a
So
new person.
true. David,
Yeah.
yes. Hi, David, and welcome. Panama, Caribe, on my sailboat. I'm French. Welcome.
I know. That's
Welcome
amazing. Yeah.
to the discussion.
Yeah. So I will say that I think that we're getting at a really interesting question here, which is, aside from like the cognitive things, right? Like, oh, I pulled the 10 of cups and that means that everything's going well and there's a happy family. Or, oh, I pulled the, 3 of wands and that means that I'm starting out on my journey. There's also the degree can actually build in our bodies if we let them. Like if we take that path, which you don't have to. You can just read for information or messages or hints and then go figure out what you're going to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a way in which you can be strengthened by sort of the spiritual energy of your modality, which I don't know, maybe that's more comfortable for some people or less comfortable, but I really needed it because I had so many health problems.
Yeah, yeah.
I
And
really
sometimes
needed
it's nice to have something tangible to hold on to,
it.
whether it's like wearing a designated color or a piece of jewelry or eating a certain food. Uh,
Mhm.
it makes it feel more real when it's tangible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one of the things that I love about astrology is that I can easily look at somebody's chart and be like, you should be eating this, you should be wearing this color. And it's amazing how often you should be wearing this stone, how often people are like, I don't have any of that in my life. And I'm like, well, this is partly why. And that's why you're having these life issues or these difficulties at work. And then, of course, because this planet is struggling, you have none of this in your life. So I'll just say yellow. My sun is not in good condition. And I owned almost nothing yellow because I really needed to like boost my solar energy. So I actually brought this in today to show you guys. Isn't this
And you know,
gorgeous?
that's so funny because we both chose to wear yellow today.
It is. It's interesting. So yellow is associated with the sun. So because I have a lack of confidence about putting myself out there, the sun is more like shining your light, right? Like being confident that you are producing beautiful energy for others. And it was Mothering Sunday. And at the church that I go to, Evensong up here, they had daffodils from somebody's garden that you could just take. And so these are the daffodils from their garden. 6 days later, I know, still an
Wow,
amazing.
they're so beautiful.
They are, right? But I'm like, I need solar energy for this
Mhm.
because I
Yeah.
lack confidence about my own communication. Thank you, Alicia. They are incredibly
Hi,
beautiful.
Alicia, and welcome. Thank you for being here. We have some new friends in the chat, so I just wanted to thank everybody for being here today and for sharing space with us. If you resonate with the content, if we would love it if you joined us for future lives. If you can, please like and subscribe. I'm hosting today on my channel, and my friend Robin has her channel. All the links are in the description box. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you a question, Elizabeth, which
Sure.
why did you get into tarot and why did you choose it over astrology? And what drew you to this modality?
I was called to tarot.
Hmm.
I was called to tarot, and this happened for me in 2020, and I had already gone back to work after the pandemic, but I can't even explain it. The thought of tarot just kind of drifted in to my mind. None of my friends that I know of read tarot, none of my family. I had no connection with it at all whatsoever, except some experiences as a kid. And I started looking online, and I saw a deck on Amazon, and I put it into my cart, and then I talked myself out of it. I pulled it out, and then I put it back in, and I put it out, and I did this for over a month.
Wow.
And then come the holidays, I decided I was going to gift it to myself. But then I was so fearful at the same time, right? So I wrapped it, but then I hid it because I felt I felt bad opening it in front of other people. So I hid it, and then I didn't know how my kids were gonna react, but they were like, "Oh, tarot, yeah, all right, whatever." They had no thoughts, feelings, or opinions one way or the other. And that's kind of how I started. Once I had the deck, I started pulling one card, um, not a day because I didn't really have a lot of time, but I started on the weekends. And then I realized quickly after about a month that if I wanted to learn it, I was going to have to do more than just one card a week, right? And so I just started doing it more often. And somehow from there, I discovered Tarot Tube. So Tarot Tube came after. And that's where I started to learn about all the different things. Uh, I have always been a fan of astrology. I was always intrigued by astrology from a very early age. I remember in high school writing a paper, and my subject was I chose the sign of Aries because that is my sign, and I chose a famous person, which for me was Vincent van Gogh. And then I wrote my whole paper based on how his strong Aries uh, characteristics were reflected in his life and in the decisions that he made and all the different things. So I've always been, but for some reason, it never dawned on me that that could be a modality that I could go for. Tarot just kept dancing in the back of my mind. I don't know where it came from. It just appeared. It just appeared, Robin. It just appeared. And I was captivated. I was
Yeah.
captivated. So yeah, that's how I ended up. Taproot. Taproot Tarot says, my kid is so open minded about it too. You know, it's funny because my kids could care less about tarot, but like all of their friends love tarot. And they all come over and they're like, oh, let me see your decks. What decks do you have right now? Some of them are subscribed to my channel. They watch my videos. And I just think it's hilarious. And
Yeah.
my son will always say, oh, yeah, this is my friend. She's into rocks and stuff too, like you. She's into rocks and tarot. And so it's interesting, right? How normal it is these days. But when I was growing up, that just wasn't the case. Taproot, it's very nice to see you here today. And thank you for being here. Welcome.
Yep. Yep. So I don't know if I told you this, but I was hoping to be a professional tarot reader.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was my goal when I got into metaphysics. I pulled that death card and I was like, this is amazing. And then I found a deck on the internet and had to wait like 6 weeks and did every research and, dived in. And I just loved, I thought it would be such a powerful archetype, right? Let us see what the cards have to say for you today, and you like lay out the cards and then you have this amazing wisdom and people are like, that was so amazing. That was exactly what I needed to hear.
Tell me more. Tell me more.
And tell me more. Right. And my spirit guides were like, well, why are you interested in that? And I'm like, because I would like to be powerful and make money. And they were like, that's not the right motivation. And I'm like, what? I thought that's what I was supposed to do. I thought I was supposed to be like a powerful female person and a successful businesswoman. Like, I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And they were like, how about if you find something that actually helps you answer the questions about how to be healthier? And I was like, okay, I guess I could try something else. So I have great respect and honor for professional tarot readers because there was a part of me that always thought like that would be such a cool thing to do. And I remember I got into astrology because I found a metaphysics group where the lady just let people practice and she would demo a technique. And I started practicing
Ooh,
on people's charts who I didn't know. They weren't even in the same room, but they were like, they were there because we were all practicing, and people were like, wow, that's amazing. And I'm like, it is kind of amazing. I guess what I said was amazing. And they were like, oh, it's super helpful. And I'm like, good, that's really great. And then I discovered, I think I have some past lives. So I never had the problem of like, I'm overwhelmed by all the symbols, or, oh, I don't know how to put this all together. Somehow it just sort of like naturally, I was like, oh yeah, because it's Venus and Aries and there's a square to Mars, and that's problem right there. People were like, oh, okay. But it's like, I skipped over the I'm overwhelmed and this is too much phase.
Yes. Well, I think too, because you're so drawn to history and math and
Yeah.
science, I feel like
Mhm.
it probably felt very natural to you.
It did. Yeah. I was a math tutor for 20 years before I got into astrology and divination. So all
Mm-hmm.
of the math and things like that is not a huge deal for me. So, but I think it's cool to see how people find the modality that really speaks to them. And I think people often are like, oh, well, I just can't master such and such for this and that reason. And it's like, well, you're not supposed to. And that's the last thing I'll say on this topic. We've had a wonderful conversation, is that really you're supposed to be good at some things, and then you're supposed to seek out other people who are good at the things you're not so good at. And that's what creates the community. The goal is not to find the one modality that will rule them all. Like, oh, I'm going to learn this, and then I'll never need any other modalities. It's like, no, actually, quite the opposite. You'll learn this one, and then you'll find other people who can give you the information you need based on their modality. And that's what draws us together, I think.
Exactly. I love that. You don't have to be the master of all of them. You just have to know where
Mhm.
to go to get the information that you need
Mhm.
in that
Yeah.
moment if it's not something that you work with.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And sometimes that information is from you and your spirit
Mhm.
guides and your reading and your tarot. And sometimes it's from somebody else who's mastered some other, method that you're like, hey, I need to talk to so-and-so because they're going to, like, I have somebody that I do Reiki. She does Reiki for me.
Mm.
And, and I do astrology for her and she does Reiki for me. And I'm just not somebody who, is doing Reiki on myself or others, because that's not the path that I've gone by, but it's kind of
Mhm.
nicer.
Yes, to kind of, yes, I love that. That is so true. That is
Yep.
so good. This
Yep.
has been so good.
Yeah. I have one more thing that came to me, if
Mm.
it's okay, is that even within your modality, you're also not supposed to be a master of everything. So like, I don't do heavy duty medical astrology. I'll do a reading if somebody's like, I've got a surgery scheduled for a certain date, and I could look at the date and talk about that. But I feel like even with tarot, like, you have to find your sweet spot. Maybe you're amazing at giving readings about money, or helping people with their business, or helping people get over a breakup, or maybe you want to do someplace else and have some other sort of focus. But I really think that it's like finding what makes you bloom and blossom is what's beautiful about these. And we all come at it from a different perspective.
Oh, I love that. So, Trio of
Yeah.
Witches, software engineer tarot appeals to me because it taps into the intuitive part of me. It
Mhm.
exercises a different part of my mind and makes me more balanced. Yes, that is so very true.
Mhm. Yeah.
Love that.
And I'm glad we live in a world where this is becoming more acceptable,
Absolutely.
you know.
Yes. Yes. More commonplace to go out to your regular run of the mill store and find the tarot deck for sale, or,
Yep.
people carrying a deck around. It's very, very common now. So I love that.
Yeah. I was at the Huntington Botanical Gardens in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, which is a
Mm.
very sort of like upper crusty, fancy neighborhood. Like, they serve afternoon tea in the cafe, like
Ah,
beautiful gardens. And there was an entire section in the gift shop on witchcraft. Yeah.
wow.
There were like books on herbs, there were crystals, there were tarot decks that were related to plants because it's the Huntington Garden. There was
Hmm.
like practical witchcraft from your garden book. Yeah. Like magnets, dish towels,
That's so
garden witch
neat.
at work. Yeah, it's really funny.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I love that. That is so cool. Yeah.
Mhm.
I love to see it more and more.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yep. Cool.
Awesome. This has been wonderful. We've touched on so many different points and gone back and forth. Thank you for everyone in the chat who have been with us, exploring and listening in. I know Saturdays, people are usually running around doing all kinds of things, but thank you for spending part of your day with us. And for those that watch back on the replay, yeah, feel free to leave any questions or thoughts in the chat, especially to some of the topics that we have touched on today. If you're using tarot or astrology in different and unique ways, we would love to hear about it.
And we have two software engineers here. So I just want to say, hooray for the people who are working in intellectual fields who also appreciate intuitive work, because I think we can get really out of balance in modern society. So I really appreciate people who are balancing both of those sides of the human brain.
Are you familiar with Benabel Wen?
I am, yes.
Yes, so I remember feeling like completely blown away because she's just so deep with her, her intuition, her knowledge of tarot and all the different things to discover that she, her day-to-day life, she's a lawyer. And I was just like, whoa, like that is so cool. Yes, I love it.
So I want to make one more comment. So I see Sandy Black says, Mary part all, enjoy Viking York. And I'll just tell you that we are here at the Coppergate shop. The Coppergate, it's like a mall. And this is the site of Viking York right here. This is the biggest Viking settlement ever excavated in York. And we are like 10 steps from the Viking Museum.
That is so, so neat.
And so it turns out that one of the reasons my spirit guide said to come here for 4 months was to learn about Viking culture and what life was like for the Vikings, because I'm sort of on a path to understand how people lived in the past with lower consumption lives. Like, how do people live when they're not just buying tons of stuff and they're not having giant houses, and people are living sort of a more like, well, if we need it, we have to make it type of existence. So yeah, I've loved Viking York. It's really cool, and I've learned a ton, and I'm hoping at some point I will be able to start writing about how do we use these sorts of modalities like tarot and astrology to live lives that aren't so high consumption. That's one of the directions in which my brain is heading.
That's awesome. Amazing. Yeah. So many big things for you. So many big things in your future. I'm so excited. We're all, cheering you on, and we can't wait to see everything. Friends, please remember to subscribe to my friend Robin. She has a wonderful Patreon website with lots of resources. So make sure to check that out. All the links are in the description box. Thank you so much.
And don't forget to subscribe to my wonderful friend Elizabeth, who is a huge cheerleader and an amazing and lovely person, and also has a great channel, More Intuitive Me, which you found if you're here. But yeah, thank you so much for Elizabeth for all your support and your encouragement. I could not have done this without you.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Oh, my pleasure, friend. Thank you. And thank you to everyone. Thank you to all my moderators and all the people that stopped by. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.
Great. Thank you. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.